Hey, Queen family, how you doing? Hope everything is well. Hope you like my new rebrand. Welcome to the show again. Today we have as our guest Susan Mathai, a family law expert, and she was here before on a show on domestic violence, homicide, and the 8 stages. Or envious.
That's a red flag. The jealousy is a red flag, and that's something you identify.
There's a nice jealousy that's there. That's natural. You know, you love someone, whatever. There's a small, but not that one about you're jealous of the career, jealous of the person's achievement, jealous of. It's because he wasn't achieving anything himself. You know.
Yeah, it's like right now we're talking about the coercive control is a pattern of behavior, so it's repeated. It is a lifestyle. It's it's not a one-off here and there. But it's something that is repeated. It is something that can say characterizes a relationship. Yeah. So like I said, she had no bank account of her own, so he was manipulating her. So stage 4 is a trigger. Was there a fear of separation? That is the trigger now. They do not want to be separated. Like I told you earlier, once you commit to one of these characters, you can't relinquish that commitment. So
what is the role of the church and her faith in this also?
The church and her faith?
Yeah.
Definitely her church, her faith says, the Christianity sort of frowns on divorce. And she would say, I have to stay married to this man. But my belief was that was perhaps the easiest explanation she could give to the situation. She was in a very, very difficult situation. She leant on her faith, and yet some people were aware that she was going through a lot. And she would say, okay, he's going to change, he's going to change. And that perhaps, to my mind, sort of reflects there are conversations that they've had that he should change when he does bad things to her.
Yeah.
As in many marriages. And he would say he's going to change. So she believed he was going to change. She committed to prayer. She was a devout Christian. She committed it to prayer. But there could be some other factors which we are not aware of as to why she stayed. And like I told you, that factor is the coercive control. That is the thing that really kept her in that home. Yeah. So
let me ask you a quick question about this coercive control. Do you know there's a lot of people who believe that a man should control his wife?
Yes.
Yeah. And a woman should submit to the control of her husband.
Yes.
Yeah. And men are usually mocked. Some men will mock each other for saying, look, you can't even control your wife. Like, for example, let's give a little bit of a parallel here. Like the Will Smith situation, Will Smith Jada situation. Yeah. Some people are looking at that as Will being weak, showing weakness, calling him a beta man, and showing weakness, and as if he could not control Jada with her red table talks. And this eventually led him to blowing up at the Oscars. So, for example, like within Nigerian society, it's very patriarchal. I've been to Nigeria like twice, and I've been around Nigeria a lot. Yeah. And so I know they're very patriarchal. And one of the things that was very saddening when I was in Nigeria was to realize about how much domestic violence there really is.
Yes.
Not so much like we have in Kenya, because in Kenya it goes beyond to murder. There's a lot of killings of women. We have a lot of femicide issues in Kenya. But in Nigeria, it almost seems to be standard practice that many women who are married, like about half of the women who are married, experience domestic violence, from their husbands. They get beaten up. Being beaten is like a normal thing for many women.
Yes.
And I was very, very, very surprised about that. Having watched a lot of Nollywood movies, or even imagining that Nigerians are so progressive and smart, you'd never imagine that in the society that this is how, how women are tolerating their marriages. The kind of behavior that they tolerate from their husbands is amazing, because of that fear of divorce and the stigma associated to women who do not remain within their marriages. So it seems like the society gives women a lot of pressure to stay in abusive
Yes.
situations. So her case in terms of being beaten or being abused doesn't seem like it's really unique or very different. I think it's just, oh, well, this is what we go through. This is what we all tolerate, just stay there and tolerate it.
Okay, so
the question,
basically,
the question is about this issue of control. What kind of control is good control or acceptable control? Is control at all a good thing for men? Should they control their wives?
We have two issues here. There's the culture and there's the faith. Okay. The culture is that the man, the faith and the culture agreed that the man is the head of the home. So, but in a Christian context, a man is supposed to love his wife like Christ loved the church. And so in fact, in my view, there's a very big responsibility on the man. In fact, that standard is higher than any other standard in the world that you can put in culture, in even any standard that the law can give, because the man is supposed to love his wife like Christ loved the church. And we know that Christ loved the church so much. He loves the church. So it is supposed to be that type of love. So when you see love that is, when you see love that is causing harm to somebody else, obviously that is not love. And there are two commandments: love God, love others as as you love yourself. So you're supposed to, in a Christian context, contrary to what many people think, even when a wife is told to submit to her husband, is that in the context of the husband himself is supposed to be loving her as Christ loved the church. So she will submit. Any woman submits in a situation where there's love, and it will be a natural thing because the order of society. That's the way it is. There are gender roles for males, there are gender roles for females. And that is the way it is. Even in culture, there are gender roles for males and gender roles for females. But that controlling a wife through physical chastisement, I know is more upheld in a cultural context, but it is not. For anybody who really understands the word of God, it is actually not allowed in the Christian context. It is wrong. It is wrong, completely wrong. And in the culture context, yes, I even was looking recently at an article where it said many Kenyan men believe they should beat their wives. Now, disabusing them of that, it is a perpetuated story that has gone on and on and on and on. But when you listen to the wise old men who have had successful marriages, they will tell you you're not supposed to beat your wife. The way you treat her is a reflection on yourself. You must honor your wife. So it is really somewhere the system has become corrupted, and the culture is just like a shortcut to managing a situation. But in any life-honoring relationship, even in a cultural context, you'll find those older men, when they're counseling people who have gone through domestic violence and they're trying to reconcile, they will speak very clearly and say that is not the way to run the home. And in fact, many will say, in this family, there is nothing like that. We do not beat our wives, And so, in my view, culture has been somewhat adulterated, and people have taken shortcuts. And because of your own weakness, you're taking a shortcut in dealing with the situation. Violence is not necessary at all, but love is germane, it's crucial. And if you love somebody, you really cannot harm them. You honor them.
Yeah.
So, in terms of control, in fact, it ceases to even. It is not in a loving relationship. You're willingly interacting with each other because of the honor and respect that you have with one another. So it's not really about control. But when you find somebody has to control, be the headmaster in a relationship, hitting people on the head, and stuff like that, you know, there's something that you may need to look at the person who needs to manage people through violence. Yeah.
Yes.
So, so for these guys, like we're talking about the stage 4 in Osinachi's case, and we're talking about the triggers. To carry on, the fear of separation is a serious trigger. Because, like I said, they don't want to relinquish that control. They never give it up, you know, unless by choice they decide, okay, I've had enough of this, I'm going to do something else. But they themselves, that choice has to be the choice of the perpetrator, not the victim. So they fear separation because when you're apart from them, they cannot control you anymore. They thrive on that relationship of control. So what are things that would be termed to be fear of separation? In situation, it could be attempts or threats to leave, or as imagined by perpetrator because of your conduct or something they're seeing that you're doing that makes them feel a bit insecure about their relationship. And anything that takes control away from them, and it can include medical illness, even bankruptcy, which will mean there's a change in their social status, can be seen as a threat to their control. The other one is for them, there's a sense of entitlement that this relationship has to, you know, continue. It has to endure. And then, but there could be something else. This person may have some mental health issues. They could have a personality disorder. They lack empathy, and they have a heavy dependency on the relationship. So they thrive off it. They thrive off that situation. So let's look at Osinachi's case. For Peter, the fear of separation, I gave an earlier example of how it was very difficult for Osinachi to go into the care of her mother when she had a baby. And it took the pleas of a third party to allow her to go home, for Peter to allow her to go home. He did not want her to go home, despite the fact there were reports that they were not able to take care of her. So, and then the other thing that was shared by program hosts and even collaborators in the ministry, the gospel collaborators would say that he would insist on same-day ministry. If she had to go overnight, it was very rare. But if she went for ministry, she goes and comes back the same day. That fear of separation. Why? Is controlling. The other thing is medical. You see what happens when one is sick, that illness, somebody else in control of what is happening. The doctors are now in charge of your situation. They're saying she must go here, she must go there, she must do this, and she must do the other. There was a story to illustrate just how much fear of separation that Peter had. After her first child, apparently with her first child, she went through a very difficult pregnancy. And her twin sister reports that Peter went and collected Osinachi from the hospital at midnight when she was still recovering. She was not well, collected her at midnight. So when the twin sister discovered—
Was she discharged by then?
No, he went and discharged her.
Hey!
Before. Yeah. It was arbitrary and preemptive, too early. She was not supposed to be out of hospital, but he went and discharged her at midnight. Why did he go at midnight? Why didn't he go, the whole scenario was just so—
Wow.
Yeah.
So that he can have control the doctors are not there.
Yeah, it just tells you something about it. So he goes at midnight, he gets her out of hospital before she was supposed to be released by the hospital. And the twin sister, when she discovered that, followed to the house. He would not allow her into the house to go and see. He would not allow her to go into the house to see her sister, because now she was really concerned about her well-being. And this was the first baby. She was not allowed into the house.
Oh my.
Yeah, she caused a scene, and eventually the neighbors tried to quell her, and we calmed everything. They pacified her and she left. But she said she would not forget how she was taken out prematurely from the hospital at midnight after the birth of her firstborn. And she had had a very difficult pregnancy. The other thing that is a trigger is fear of change of status. And for instance, when Osinachi, maybe when she was unwell, when she would go through those sessions of being unwell, income would go down. Also, he claimed to be a pastor, you know, and pastors are supposed to be, you know, the stalwart people, the people who are supposed to be reflecting of good behavior. But of course, we know by his fruits, which he hid, people did not know about it outside the home. You can tell that. I mean, the pastor himself, Osinachi's pastor, was very shocked, according to his reports, to learn that she had been subjected to so much violence by this man who claimed to be a pastor.
Yeah.
And so,
and
so
and
those
her
are the
pastor is a doctor. I've been to that church.
Yeah.
That Dunamis church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dunamis, yeah.
Yeah, Dunamis church. I've been to that. I went to that church actually a couple of times, and I was really surprised. It's a very huge church, and they were building a new one. I think they now are probably using that new facility. It's huge, like gigantic, you know. But so like literally, you have congregants coming in for one service and leaving out the door, while another group is coming in, and there are others sitting outside on the bench under tents waiting to go in. So it is run like a clock like this: 5 o'clock to 6, 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock, 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And the guy, her pastor is surrounded literally by bodyguards. Some of those guys are actually bodyguards around him. You cannot really come very close to him, that Pastor Paul. Yeah. The choir is right at the front of the church. And if you're sitting in the congregation, you can hardly even really see their faces, because of how large that church is. So what they have is that they have all these like TV screens all over the church.
Yeah.
That's how big it is. I have never seen anything like that. But where the pastor is completely surrounded by guys in uniform, some of his own people, right? They have a special uniform, and they have surrounded him as the pastor. So I can just imagine maybe Osinachi may not have even had that level of access to her own pastor that we imagine that she would have had. You know what I mean? There's a kind of reverence that you have. There's a kind of reverence and respect that one is expected to have towards the pastor. So rather than expect, and the reverence to this particular pastor is at a very, very high level. She may not really have had that ability to really, you know, like talk to him and go to him specifically. Maybe she would have even over-respected him and maybe almost, you know, put him at a really high, pedestalized him. To the point where he's out of reach. He's not even at her level. So she cannot really come to him, because he kept saying, why are you people hiding all this information away from me? And now he needs to understand that he's not as accessible to his sheep. They call them sheep, yeah? Yeah, he's not as accessible to his sheep as he thinks. There's a lot of pain. And yet at the same time, he also called for people to come to the altar, to come and talk about their problems. So people, like within the congregation, people went down. But maybe within his group of people who are working with him, he needs to check and see whether there are some gatekeepers that are keeping people away from him, people that are working very closely to him, away from him, to talk about their problems.
So I think there's a different angle to that. I think from Osinachi's point of view, she was trying to protect her husband from being exposed. She did not want him to be exposed. He's a pastor, and that is why anybody who would say they want to talk about it should literally go on her knees and cry and beg. This is the report, and say, we could not say. She begged us not to say anything. Her twin sister said, she went on her knees and begged me not to say anything. The choir, her fellow choristers, because she was in that choir you've described. She was a soloist in that choir that you described. Some of them came to know about it. They said she went on her knees and begged them not to say anything.
Not to expose.
That things will change, things will change, and that, you know, just pray for them. So this is a situation she was in. Her music producer, when he witnessed that slap also, he was going to say something, and she pleaded with him, please don't.
Yeah.
Please just leave it. And that is definitely a situation like I described to you in coercive control, where they fear the reaction of the perpetrator more than anything else. So she knew, for instance, when they go home, maybe they're going to be held to pay, trouble at home if this guy responded in any way.
Yeah.
So she would plead with them. All these people who wanted to say something about it, she would plead with them, just keep quiet. Don't say anything. Pray. Just pray for me. Things will change. So definitely she was in a very, very difficult situation. So people should not be asking, why couldn't she leave? The truth of the matter is that she could not.
Yeah.
She could not. So the next stage, number 5, is escalation. And this is where, for instance, where there's fear of separation and it occurs, see? Or they are afraid of it happening. And so what they do is they try to plead for that restoration of the relationship. And they can resort to many methods. In the case of Osinachi and Peter, he resorted to threats. At least the one incident I was able to get was like when I told you I was going to talk about this later on. But remember, I talked about the one time when she was allowed to go and stay with her mother for care. And she stayed with her mother for about a year. And then the mother said, you're not going back to that marriage and the marriage is over. And the husband, Peter, now told the mother, not anybody else, the mother. And he repeated this. If she doesn't come back alive, she will come back dead.
Just imagine.
And at this stage, at stage 5, when somebody makes that statement, you should take it to be really a threat to commit homicide.
Homicide. Yeah.
Homicide.
So maybe they didn't take it, they didn't really take it as seriously as they would have, because maybe they would have, maybe people do, make these utterances just like that. Maybe it's common for people to make those types of utterances in relationships.
No, this type of character in this context, when that person makes a statement like that, it should be taken seriously.
It should have been taken seriously, yeah.
Yeah, so you have to put everything in context. Everything has to be put in its right context.
Yeah.
And so in this particular context and at this stage, where there was fear of separation, that she would not come back home, and his threat was, if she doesn't come back alive, she will come back dead.
Imagine, yeah.
You see, if the mother actually mentioned when she decided to go back, she told her, this man is going to kill you. He has threatened, he will kill you the way he said. And the mother was very worried about it. But Osinachi said, I have to go back. This is my husband, this is my marriage. But like I told you, there are some other factors, underlying factors, which are not as obvious to us. But once you do an analysis, you'll see it is the level of coercive control this lady was subjected to that was making her fear. And perhaps the easiest explanation would be my faith. I told you, even at that time, her mother asked her whether this man was abusing her, and she denied it.
Yeah, she did.
And yet she had heard it from so many sources.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you decide that you are not going to go back, this person might try to love bomb you, try to do all these things, and they're saying, okay, these things are not working well. And so they get into this, okay, let us try this, let us try that. And there's something they call last chance thinking. And this is when they say, oh, come for a drink. Okay, you come for your things from the house then. If you're not going to come back, you come for your things from the house. I don't know how many cases. I think in the US, I was watching some statistics earlier on in the year, and they're saying like 57% of the cases where these ladies go back to the house for their things, they go missing.
Missing.
And you know what that means? They go missing. So these last chance offers should be avoided at all times, because that is when things will rapidly go south. Once they get you isolated and in their control, you end up in a problem.
Yeah.
So Like I talked about.
What kind of shows you, what kind of indicates that there was a last chance call for her to go? I mean, is there any sort of indication?
No, for her, she was threatened. For her, what we have is that threat that I told you about.
Okay.
And that one incident. And I'm sure there were others.
Will change. Like
yeah, no, the threat was that to the mother, the one incident that we have got that information,
okay.
Was that she either comes back home alive or dead. That was the threat, yeah. And so, that is something that the mother recognized very quickly for what it was, but Osinachi was more fearful of being separated, of the consequences of annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens is, for instance, if, say in Osinachi's case, at the point in that, let's go back to that time early in their marriage.
Yeah.
I think it was after the third child. She says she's not coming back. Supposing that's what happened at that stage, okay? Stage 6, that is what they have the change in thinking. And this is now, we're going into high risk areas. So at this point, because she has refused to go back, and let me go back a little bit. What happens normally that we find in many homes and many relationships, they oscillate between stage 3, 4, and 5, 3, 4, and 5. And what happens, that's the relationship, the trigger, and then the escalation. And then it goes back. And at the escalation stage, which is stage 5, there are 3 things that can happen. 1, the person decides, okay, I've had enough of this relationship, and goes their own way. So they leave you alone. 2, you decide to go back, which is what Osinachi did. She went back after that threat. Yeah. 3 is you say, I'm not going back. Now, when you decide you're not going back, that is when you advance to stage 6. That is the change in thinking. And then change in thinking, this is now in the perpetrator. They make a decision to punish you for causing that separation. Because it's not them who have willingly given it up, it is you who has forced it. They make a decision to punish. So this is what they call the change in thinking. And this person at this point in time can appear to be different, to be calm. Or if you have put yourself in a situation where there is continued sort of like contact with this person, or for instance, in Osinachi's case, she went back, right? But there could have been a situation where he may have been aware that there is a possibility that she intends to leave at some point.
Yes.
So he could, because he doesn't want her to leave, he could escalate the violence and manipulation and gaslighting. So the situation at the home could have worsened very much from that time. The one thing I noticed which could have caused the fear of separation in Peter, apart from that incident where she went home, was her illness. She had illnesses, and she, toward the end of her life, and she was in and out of hospital. And so I've called this scenario 1, when she was in and out of hospital. So he was no longer in control of what was going on. The doctors were in control of that particular situation. She went from the pastor, she went for a number of tests. She would be admitted and out and in and out and in and out and in and out. So he sort of lost control of that situation. And that to somebody like him, that would be a situation that would not make him happy.
So that would be interpreted as a threat to his control.
Yeah, the other scenario, because the reported cases of violence, was that when she went back, the violence escalated. So it became worse. And there could have been, and we don't know this, many women are beaten and they don't talk about it. They hide, they heal at home. There may also be situations where she was beaten and hospitalized before, but we don't know. But they're calling it, according to the YouTube, they're calling it, the women's representative, she was referring to it as serial domestic violence was meted out on her. And so, you know, he tried to manipulate her. So perhaps even when she was in the hospital and somebody else wanted to take care of her, he would manipulate a situation so she would return to the home instead of maybe going to the care of somebody else. So even the gaslighting continued, and he inhibited her reliance on her own processes of decision-making. So she would not say, I want to go to my mom. She would just leave all the decisions to him. And so at this point in time, because the person wants to control the situation and they can see they have not controlled the situation, they get the sense that this person is going to leave them at some point. They see themselves as people who are, that there's an injustice that has been perpetrated against them by the victim. So perpetrators always view themselves as victims. Even, I'm sure, when you hear the testimony of this man, you'll hear him not accepting any blame or responsibility, that he is the victim in the situation. Then we go to the planning stage, which is 7.